Hello and welcome to the GYDA Initiative Talks, and today I really am absolutely delighted to welcome our guest Cate Sevilla. Cate has written a book which is kind of winning accolades and top 10s and top 20s all over the place, called How to Work Without Losing Your Mind, and the timing is immensely perfect for all of us. So firstly, Cate, hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. So let's just get straight into the nitty gritty of it. So what's the background that you end up writing this book? Tell us about what you were doing before and how you've got here.
Sure, yeah. No, so I was working in online editorial, digital publishing, digital media, whatever you would like to call it. So I'd been doing that since I moved to the UK, really, in 2006. And I worked for myself for a while. I worked for a blog publishing company in the UK when that was the thing to do. And then I eventually realized that I would quite like to make some money, perhaps. So decided to get, a proper job. I'm still on the internet, but a proper job. So I started at MSN and I worked for there for a while. And then I was at BuzzFeed UK, where I became the managing editor there for a few years. And then I kind of switched what I was doing. So rather than, running editorial teams for digital publications, I then started to work for tech companies and tech startups, running smaller editorial teams and focusing on their content. So it was interesting always being like two journalists in a room of 70 engineers versus the flip of that at places like when I was at BuzzFeed, where you would have like one techie person and then just a sea of journalists. So I was at Google for a while. I worked at a tech startup that was founded by the ex Top Gear presenters, so Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and James May, which was interesting. So when I was at Google, I had an interesting time there. I learned a lot, but primarily I learned more about my relationship with work and my career, and I had quite a intense, stressful experience there. And then I went on to be the editor-in-chief of the online women's website, The Pool, which then spectacularly shut down in a rather public, dramatic fashion. So that was also very stressful. And I found myself very swiftly without a job, and had to kind of ask myself what it was that I wanted to do next. What did I have the emotional capacity for? What did I actually really want? And I remembered that I had this on my phone. I had a list of things that I had learned over the past few years from my career, from working. And I just kind of had that sat on my phone. And I remember I thought, oh, maybe I'll turn this into some articles one day. Maybe I'll turn this into a podcast eventually. And then maybe if both of those things go okay, I might be able to write a book one day. And then I kind of had to stop kidding myself and just get to the thing that I actually wanted to be doing, which was writing a book. So that was kind of the background for how to work without losing your mind. And yeah, it very much is the kind of culmination of the last few years of difficult jobs and difficult working
Wow.
situations.
Wow. So I'd be really curious to know about the how of the book, because certainly for me, uh, the first book was like the first album. You put the last 10 or 15 years of experience into it, and it's big and it's huge and it's dense. By the time I got to the third album, I think it was written. I was on a ski trip and I incapacitated myself when I had 6 days ahead of myself sitting in a ski chalet,
Oh no.
waiting for people to come in drunk at night. And so I wrote that one in 6 days top to bottom. So I'd be really
Wow.
just curious about what was the process about writing the book? You start at the beginning? Do you do the chapters you preferred? How did it go?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I haven't really had anyone ask me that before. But yeah, that whole side of things I really enjoyed it. It was really interesting. So I think I got my book deal with Penguin Business in July 2019. And then, it's kind of the summertime and there's not much happening in the world of business. Things move quite slowly. So it wasn't until about October that things kind of got more intense. I was like, oh, I should probably get this done because it was due in January. But it wasn't until kind of that October time that we kind of, myself and my editor, really kind of nailed the kind of structure for it. And I then realized that I had said that I would interview a whole bunch of people. And then I was like, okay, I suppose I should really get started with that. So a lot of it initially was I had obviously a chapter structure that was in the proposal. But really it was then, okay, well, who can I speak to? What other stories beyond my own? Because I didn't want this to just be like a memoir about my hard time at work. I wanted it to be, okay, this is what I've learned, but also this also relates to a lot of different people that have worked in a lot of different industries and have different levels of experience, as well as, experts like therapists and HR specialists as well. So really the structure was there, and then it was um, speaking to people and finding those common threads, and then other things would come up from those conversations, and I realized, oh gosh, I should probably speak to somebody about what it's like to go back to work after a loved one dies. What is that experience like, the return to work after a bereavement? So there were lots of things like that. So really the overall how and structure was born out of other people's stories and the stories that kind of fit together best, combined with the things that I really wanted to talk about and felt necessary to address. Because a lot of the stuff I feel is addressed in some capacity, but I don't think in a business book people usually talk about, what it's like to have a miscarriage at work, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really unusual genre, and it's one
Mm.
that it's almost like you have created your own unique sort of space in the market, because most of the books are like mine, which are like, how do you grow the business, or strategy, or marketing, or processes, or systems, or recruiting people, or employing
Yeah.
people, or motivating people, and and either they're horrifically corporate, or they're relatively corporate, and then there's a handful of books which are personal, without um, without being what's the word I'm looking for, without obsessing with my story and my
Yeah.
problem, and so on and so forth. That's a really interesting line line to tread. So what to your mind, because I always think it's really interesting, you write something and you think it's about this, that, and the other, and then you read the reviews and discover that people almost read a different book. It's interesting. That's not what I was trying to say. What did you feel your key messages were?
Sure. I think my key messages in writing this were really um, going through the sort of how necessary it is to, one, realize how serious work stress is, burnout, whatever it is that you want to call it, that those feelings and the effect that it has on your mind and your body and your world, your relationships with other people, like that's something to be taken seriously. It's not something that should just be brushed off. And then also um, understanding what is in your control at work and with your career, and what is not in your control. Because I think that sometimes we are made to think, and we might believe ourselves that we can control all of it, including other people's behavior, including how a difficult manager decides to react to you or decides to treat you. But actually, that's not that's not your control at all. That's, you can't, there's only so much you can do with that. So I think really those were the overall messages that I wanted to get across in this book, is really, look after yourself at work and to think more closely about your relationship with your own career. It's funny, as you said, with reading reviews and stuff, I think I didn't realize quite how much I swore in this book. The FT kindly put out, like, this is quite a sweary book. The first chapter is quite angry, and I was like, oh, I guess it is.
That's okay. That's that.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, that's fair.
And yeah, and it's kind of bizarre. I mean, it feels bizarre to me that despite 2,000 years of civilization, we still don't treat staff, employees,
Yes.
fairly. We still haven't figured out that our work is so much part of our identity for everyone who goes to work,
Yeah.
and yet we don't treat everyone well. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
how,
a problem that we seem to struggle with on all sorts of levels. The need to make things hierarchical and to have some sort of class system and some sort of these people are better than those people is yeah, that's ingrained in our society and unfortunately very much reflected in the workplace, as you were saying.
and do you think that's almost like a, as you alluded to, sort of a class political problem that we have
Yeah, absolutely.
hierarchies and not just hierarchies and stereotypes, and whether that's about race or about sex or about religion, and there's a kind of a corporate, not a corporate mentality, but there's an unwritten rule book about
Yes.
what people expect and don't expect of people at different levels.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I wish I had a degree or had taken years of my life to study sociology properly, so I could give you a very scientific sociological answer for that. But I think definitely that is ingrained in how our society functions, and particularly in the UK, that class system. And specifically problems with race, which I guess the UK government has declared is not a problem, even though it very much is. Beg to differ, but I think that absolutely is reflected in the workplace, and so unnecessarily. It's like there's a weird thing that happens with class and race and just having figures of authority, and then that's one thing, but then also you kind of have this weird sort of familial psychodrama that can be kind of uh, manifest itself as work at work as well. So I think wherever there are figures of authority and people who are in charge and then the people who are below. I mean, you literally have, every organizational, their org chart where they say these are the people that are in power, and then you can follow and see where your name is right down at the bottom, that you do not have as much power and there are no lines coming out of your name to other names. So you're not in charge of anyone. So therefore you don't have any power. And I think that in itself is a this demonstrates a huge problem that we have in our workplaces, where if you are low down that org chart and you don't have any other names sprouting off of your name and therefore you're not in charge, it makes it look like you are not as successful or that you're not progressing. And this idea of individual contributors versus managers, it's it's just unfair, really, because no matter what, even if, like, when I was at Google, if you are classified as an individual contributor, it, it's somehow seen as less than someone who manages a team of five. Never mind if they do it well or not. Just the fact that they're managing a team is seen as being better, or that you're progressing. And
No,
we've
the first thing at Google is they look at your past to see whether you're a Googler or whether you're an intern. That's
yes,
it's
yes,
like
yes,
let's just sort this out. So you're
yeah.
not on the payroll. Okay,
Yes, you
fine.
could have been a contractor there for about
That's
10
right.
years, but still
That's
would
right.
not be as important as a full-time employee, which is
That's right.
insane.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
And it's fascinating. I mean, it's. See, I always thought that if you're at the top, it's fine because you make the rules. It's control, influence. I've got this kind of model in my mind about there are things you can control, things you can influence, and things you can
Yes.
do sod all about. And if at the top, you just wave your arms around and people do or don't do what you want them to do,
Literally.
so to speak. If you're at the bottom, you have no control, but that's kind of okay because you just wait for stuff to arrive and then you do or don't do it. I always kind of thought that the worst place to be was kind of in the middle, because there you've got them up there kind of telling you what needs to happen, and you're trying to figure out whether them down there and you are able to accommodate that. So I always had this model in my mind, just not not that maybe being in the middle is the worst place, because
Yeah.
you get grief from the people beneath you who you're trying to keep happy, and you
Yes.
get grief from the people above you who
Yeah, everyone
you're
hates you from all directions, basically.
or everyone loves you. I'm not sure. That's an interesting view, and of course, different industries. I know someone really well who works in the most ruthless, macho part of banking,
Ugh.
and so there is no mental health problem, because we're all here to make oodles of money. Some people commit suicide, but that's just because the stress got
That's
to
just
them.
them. They just couldn't
That,
handle it.
yeah, we've all, but basically that this dog eat dog world is absolutely okay. And of course, they get home and they're still full of adrenaline, and they're trying to make
It's
their children
terrible.
competitive, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And but at least that's in some senses honest. Whereas I
Hmm.
would argue that in some agencies where we have a inclusive and sit on the beanbag and
Yeah.
wear what you want and come what you want. Actually, in some senses, there's more. Um, what's the word I'm looking for?
I say
Hidden
delusion.
layers. Yeah, more hidden. There's
Yeah.
more hidden messaging, and there's it's almost more passive aggressive going
Yes.
on, and it's harder to guess. Oh, you didn't put the organic Oatly milk in my decaffeinated tea. Didn't you realize it? And there's almost more pressure of that than, at least in the banking world, they'll just throw the cup of coffee at you and tell you to get out of the room. So you
Yes.
kind of know where you know where you stand in some senses in that banking world. Whereas um,
Yeah.
there's something a little bit more difficult
It's
to.
more transparent, and in a way, yeah, that's interesting. No one's I've not had anyone say that to me before. And you're right. No, it is because I think places like that, I think particularly like if you are going into law, I mean, lawyers notoriously work incredibly long hours, and the working culture in most big law firms, from the people I've spoken to, is not great, but in a way that's to be expected. I would say, I mean, none of it is great, and it definitely needs changing, but at the same time, yes, if you are going into an industry like banking, and to specifically go and work in some of those companies that are notorious for that sort of behavior, I guess in a way, yes, at least they are hideously transparent and blatant in their values, are what they actually are. They're not, oh, we say this thing and then we do this thing.
Mm, mm.
In a way, yes, at least it is more straightforward. And in a weird way, it reminds me of when I was working with, Clarkson and that lot. In a way, like, you knew kind of what to expect, and they are very kind of, you know, we are how we are, and everyone works around us because we are this way. We don't have to adapt, we don't have to change, because everyone will do the work around us, so we don't have to necessarily evolve. And I guess in a way, the industries like that, like the offices that you were describing, they don't have to change or evolve because they are very transparent, and everyone just goes, "Yep, this is how it is here." Doesn't make it okay, and it should change, but in a
No, but
way
don't
that is easier to navigate than going into an office where they, at an agency or whatever, where they say, "Oh yes, we care very much about mental health, and we care very much about diversity and inclusion." And as you said, we have some nice bean bags and some really nice organic snacks. And if you're having some bad feelings, we're here to talk to your HR. We have mental health drop-in days, blah blah blah. And then you're hounded and treated very passive aggressively, and yeah, and they'll hire like one token black person, one token gay person, and be like, look how inclusive they are. And then they shove those people to the front of the office photo, and everything's fine here. Yeah, that's so much harder to navigate when
But I think
outwardly.
I mean this conversation is feeding both of our pessimists, because I think there are lots of places, which I'm around, where they are just breathtakingly great places, where
Yes.
they've gone, not particularly consciously, ironically, in most of these places. I'm thinking one particular agency which is 80, 100 people strong. It's just how they are,
Mm.
and the agency is a reflection of the people that own and run it, and the agency I'm thinking of has won a whole bunch of awards, and it was like, oh my word, yeah, this diversity thing that suddenly has appeared circa 2018, halfway through 2018, it suddenly appeared as being a thing. Well, that's kind of, Yeah, we could do the head count. Yeah, the head count does have like we have got 5% white males, but that's not that was never deliberate. It was just
Yeah,
how we do stuff, and we know that the best way of getting the best results of a team is to have yeah
different people.
loads of people brackets who happen to be different making stuff
Yeah,
happen,
yeah,
and it was not a formulaic thing that I think often happens
no,
in large brands where they say, oh, we're going to be non-sex specific, blah, 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 and we're going to make a thing of that because there's not enough people in Farringdon or wherever your agency
yeah.
is who are doing that, and we can differentiate ourselves. It's a,
Yes, some people just, as you said, just do that organically and
yeah.
naturally. And it's wonderful when you get people who think that way just normally and are therefore in charge of hiring and building a team and just kind of their values as being kind of just good, normal people
Well,
then
that's what we're after.
translates to their company.
But I do think there is. I mean, Germaine Greer, had to burn her bra so that other women who came behind her could be treated relatively normally. She had to be extreme. She had to be loud.
Yes, yes,
She had to be
exactly. Yeah.
kind of out there so that other
Mm.
people didn't have to be so extreme in a way. So we do need these the vanguards at the front,
Yeah, absolutely.
whether they are slightly mercenary in their thinking or not. I mean, I'd prefer they weren't mercenary, but okay. Let's get on to the book. Is is the book just for women?
Right. No, no, it is focused on. I mean, you'll notice it's not pink. I don't think I say for ladies anywhere in it, but I do address in the introduction
Mm,
particularly that um, basically the themes throughout the book are universal, I think, to any gender, of work stress, dealing with a difficult manager, dealing with comparison culture at work, dealing with your mental health at work. Those are all things that affect everyone, unfortunately. But there are also a lot of things in the book that I address that specifically impact people who identify as women, and things like having dealing with fertility issues at work. I don't go a heck of a lot into sexism at work because I feel like there are people who can do that a lot
mm,
better than me. But certainly dealing with kind of the odd dynamic that can happen between older women and younger women at work that we don't really like to talk about because it's super uncomfortable. So yes, so there are definitely things, and the way that I write it obviously is from my standpoint of experiencing work in the workplace as a woman. But equally, there's lots of stuff that I would say is useful and helpful for anyone.
But I mean, the timing of the book is not impeccable, as if. But there are so many things going on that the book alludes
Yes.
to about how women
Yeah.
are being treated and how women see themselves. That's what I mean. I mean, you mentioned, the manager from hell. I suddenly worry that the people that work for me are probably laughing their heads off as I start talking about how to deal with the manager from hell. They're going,
They're
is he
like,
really
oh,
talking
did you
about it?
read
What,
it?
him talking about dealing? Um, just riff for me a bit on, how because we've all had, every one of us has
Yes.
had a manager, and if not a manager, a client from hell. But we've all had
Yes.
a
Clients from
manager.
hell are a whole other.
That's a whole book in its own right. But I mean,
Yes.
I mean, what do you say to people about dealing with a manager from hell?
Yeah. I mean, it can have such a massive impact on your daily life, really. Like the way the ways in which difficult managers can affect your effectiveness at work, your the way that you feel about your career, your own kind of identity. It has a massive impact, unfortunately. So I think when I speak to people, or when I kind of approach, how do I tackle this in just one chapter, if not an entire book, um, what the most important thing that I personally had to kind of realize when dealing with a difficult manager was, okay, what is actually going on here? What is it exactly in their behavior that is so upsetting to me, that I find so stressful? And then why am I finding those things so stressful? And really having to do a lot of kind of self-reflection and work to look into, why when they, ask me where I am at 9:31 in the morning, is that so upsetting to me? And a lot of it for me kind of boiled down to working for somebody who I felt did not appreciate my expertise and was very kind of suspicious about my motives all the time. And I had to kind of like, why is this so upsetting to me? And it kind of boiled down to this. I felt like I wasn't trusted to do my job. And that was really upsetting to me because I obviously had a lot of expertise. I was headhunted to be in this role. And then there was this disconnect between, why I thought I was there, what I thought I could bring to the table, and what was kind of actually playing out in real time with my manager. So I think getting to, if you can, through either journaling or talking to other people or talking to a therapist, why you're finding this relationship so difficult and what specific parts of their behavior you're finding so difficult. And then having to kind of go, okay, well, what do I think what can change here? What can change with a conversation, with repeated conversations, with kind of working together? Sometimes having an honest conversation, someone and just being like, look, obviously there's a lot of tension between us. I really don't want for there to be this tension, and I'm sure you don't either. What can we do to alleviate this? I'm having a hard time with this, that, and the other. I suggest we maybe try doing this. Would that work for you? Is there anything else that you kind of need from me that we can try to, make this better? Because really, at the end of the day, they're a human being. You're a human being. You're working together. They're not your mom. They're not the president of the United States. They're mainly just a person who might be a few years younger than you or a few years older than you. Like, we're people. So sometimes just having a blunt conversation about, kind of what's going on, how can we make it better, can help. Other times it can't. And that, no matter how much work you put in, no matter how many difficult conversations you have, sometimes it just doesn't get better. And for me, it was getting to that point of knowing what was in my control, what was kind of my stuff, what was out of my control, that was all their stuff, and kind of sitting with that kind of that discomfort and that space in between those two things, and just being like, okay, well, at least now I have perspective on what's actually going on and what I can change and what I can't. So what do I want to do about it? And that's when you kind of can make the decision of, okay, is this just kind of doable enough? I like this paycheck. Maybe I'll just bide my time before I can get a new job, or I absolutely can't continue to work here, so I need to make a swift exit,
So that's about it's that they talk about parent, adult, child, that transaction analysis thing, and that parent, child, parent is which is quite often the conversation between manager and report, and getting it to an adult conversation, and I think that as someone who I struggle with being a great manager, because I'm okay, let's go on, let's do the work. Why do we need to ask what they did at the weekend? What's that got to do with anything? So note to yourself, ask if they had a good weekend. Yes. But I think I have been managed really well, I think is a way of putting it. To go, yeah. Do you know that when we come in and you don't say anything to us, that's kind of quite hurtful. And it's like, it never occurred to me, because I've been in the office since 8 o'clock and I'm in the middle of doing something.
Yeah,
so if I just wave my hand, isn't that enough? Well, not really, because I've been away for 2 or 3 days. There's a couple of things I wanted to share with you. Oh, okay. Do you want me to stop what I'm doing and listen to you? Yeah. So in some senses, I think managing,
managing up.
manage upwards, managing
Yes.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. A
And
lot of it is managing up, and no one really tells you about that. And I didn't know that was a thing until I found myself constantly doing it, and then realized, oh, this is a thing that you have to do. And I think, as you were just saying, and I say in the book, sometimes managers can just be a bit crap and not realize, either because they were trained to be a manager a certain way, or no one has ever said to them, hey, or they weren't given any training, or no one said to them, hey, did you know that you do this thing? And I would really like for you to do this thing. And I think that needs to, I think so often direct reports, employees, whatever you want to call them, choose to not have those conversations because they just kind of go, well, they should just know. I've done that
Yeah,
so many times. They should
yeah,
just know. They're just crap. They should just know
yeah.
that I need
So,
this. But they don't know. They're not mind readers, and you
so
have
I had
to
I had
speak
a
up.
I worked with a wonderful girl called Liz when I worked at Warwick Business School, and she took me aside and said, "Do you want to ask me? Do you want to ask me what would make working for you become great?" So I said, "All right." So she said, "Go on then." So I went, "Oh, okay. You want me to ask you what would what would making what would working for me great? What would that be?" And she said, "You give me everything by 10 o'clock in the morning. You tell me when you want it to be by. You don't stand on my shoulder looking over my shoulder. You look me straight in the eye. You stop telling me those stupid jokes I'm not interested in." And she just laid out everything was entirely reasonable, and and as a result, she was able to do her job because everything was handed in by 10 o'clock.
Yes.
It had a date on when it needed to be done by, how important it was. I
Yes.
stopped interfering and, back to your word, trust. So I wasn't just
Yeah.
hovering over and going, "Do you really mean to be?" And
Not like
and
that.
she took, you know, she felt better because she was now working in the way that she wanted to, and she actually got more out of me, and she managed up,
That's
for which I thank
fantastic.
her.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you were saying you were joking about, what if I'm the bad manager and my staff's like, what are you talking about? But like, I don't think a truly bad manager would ever look at that conversation and actually change their behavior or take what their direct report is saying on board. The really, really bad managers are the ones who just believe that they are good at what it is that they are doing, don't listen to feedback, and just think that they are always right. And then even worse, their manager backs them up with that. So it's
Yeah.
like if you were truly a really bad manager, you wouldn't have told that story just now.
Oh,
You
you're
know what I
making me
mean? Like,
you're making me feel better. So, but I mean, this is all connected to kind of the burnout thing, burnout
mm,
and mental health, because if you're under that pressure,
yeah.
and our ident I'm just trying to work this out in my own mind as we go through
Mm,
it. If our identity is so associated with what we do at work, it is so important. What's the first thing we say to people? What do you do? Then burnout and mental health issues kind of follow fairly closely on from it not working well at work. So I mean, is there a separate piece about avoiding burnout, or is burnout? I guess if there is, because you can have a great manager, but you can still burn out. How do
yeah.
you, how?
I think, yeah, I mean, interestingly, what it's I think it has you have to have personal responsibility for your own well-being, your own mental health. So that if you are working for this, nightmare boss who has no boundaries and has really high expectations, maybe being micromanaged, whatever it is, um, you then have to kind of do that work to set boundaries and look after yourself. And that's a whole job in itself, right? But equally, you could have a really supportive, chill manager who is very respectful of your time and cares about your well-being and, is very reasonable. But if you are just in a tizzy, if you don't have that sort of self reflection, maybe you've not done a lot of managing of your own mental health before, maybe you've not really considered or thought about the impact that your work and your work habits have on your mental health. You could be in the most supportive working environment, but if you don't have that self awareness and that you're not taking that responsibility for yourself, it makes no difference, right? And that really comes back to, what are you in control of and what's not within your control, right? So that very much, I think that part of the mental health conversation, the taking responsibility for your own well-being and for your own sake, but then also for your working environment's sake, for your colleagues' sake, because if you're not containing your own mental health at work, and I don't mean that you should be compartmentalizing it or that you should pretend that it's not there or be fake or hide. I don't mean that. I mean, just having some healthy boundaries, because your colleagues and your manager can know, for example, if you have an anxiety disorder, or just if you just, have a bad day here and there where you get quite anxious. That's not something that you necessarily need to hide, but it's the kind of conversation doesn't start and stop at, I have this thing, just so you know, and I go to therapy sometimes. It's, I have this thing, I go to therapy. And also, in a day where you know that you're having a hard time, it's being able to realize that in yourself and go, right, is this a day that maybe I need to work from home? Is this a day where maybe I just need to let my manager know, hey, I'm having a bit of a hard day. So if you see me in the back of the office with my headphones on, I'm not trying to, ignore everyone, but I kind of just need to get on with a few things today. I'm not feeling that great. That's the kind of difference, rather than taking it out on everyone because you're having a hard day, but you don't want to let them know. And if that makes sense.
Yeah, but isn't work sometimes the not the necessarily the trigger, but it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back. In other words, I can think of someone specifically who I know really well who was having a lot of difficulties, and like kind of working in a tech environment where it's, high pressure, deliver, deadlines. It literally broke him,
Yeah.
but it didn't cause yeah it wasn't the cause
Cause.
of the breakdown.
No,
It just pushed him too far. And
absolutely. Yeah.
and is it not quite common that work is kind of
Plays
where it
out.
comes out? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it did so for me. It it really, there were things just within myself, within my own psychology, things that I was working out that um I didn't really realize were a problem until I was in a really stressful environment, and things just got triggered. Sometimes like you can contain it in your everyday life, and then the minute you're kind of outside your comfort zone in a really high pressure situation, or maybe you're working for somebody who maybe acts like somebody from your past or whatever it is, work can be really, really triggering. And actually, I think it was when I was working a really kind of stressful job and had really weird working hours, that for me was the thing that sent me back to therapy. Because when I wasn't in that situation, I could kind of manage it. And then when I was in that situation, it was like, oh God, I need to get some extra help with this.
Brilliant. And I often have a post-it on my monitor that says "It's a game," to remind me that you know business running a business is in many ways a game where you're trying to figure out what the rules are, and you have a
Yes.
part or a role to play. And at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock or whatever the time is, you do actually step away from you step away from the keyboard, you step
Yes.
away from the game. My I am not what I am in front of the keyboard. and
Absolutely.
and I think we society kind of makes us think that is what our identity is, what we are, and therefore if we're not performing well at work, we've got a next door
We're bad
neighbor who
people.
you've got a next door neighbor who's just finishing a delivery job, and it's his whole identity. He feels really challenged by the fact that he's I need to find work. I'm not working, but the work was doing his head in, doing him in.
Yes.
So we can see how that burnout piece. I mean, are there tips or guidelines, or are there kind of are there like alarm bells that people see when they should be taking their mental health more seriously? I mean, how does it work?
Yeah. I mean, I know I had someone ask me before, like, when do you think that you should go and get therapy? And that's a really hard thing. Like, no one can tell you when. I mean, a close friend or your partner might be able to be like, yeah, but it's really different for everybody. And I think for me, it was I was ignoring the sort of mental signs that I was like I knew I was stressed, but I didn't quite. And had been in therapy for like 4 years at this point, so it wasn't like I wasn't used to self-analyzing, but I didn't quite feel how stressed I was until my body told me. And so I got all these like weird physical symptoms. I had, an eye twitch that lasted like 6 weeks straight.
Wow.
Yeah, not really hard to read things. Um, so I think, if we were paying more attention to, our own emotions, but then also our bodies and the connection between the two. There are
Yeah.
so many people I know who are like, yeah, I have, this intolerance and this weird thing going on in my skin. I have really bad eczema and all these things that are then traced back to stress,
Yeah.
and not realizing it until it got really bad. So I think that is one thing, paying attention to your body and the connection between your body and your mind, and how stress might be affecting that. Um, Really, it's just kind of boring self-maintenance stuff is the way to kind of prevent it. And a lot of times, uh, if you're feeling good, you don't think, hey, I should be doing this stuff to look after myself. Because if you're having a good day, you don't think like, oh, I should do some preventative stuff. It's like with exercising and stretching, you don't always think like, hey, I should definitely stretch before this run. Because if you're feeling okay, well, I'm just gonna go run, and then you end up doing some damage to yourself or whatever. So I think a lot of this is, and it's the hardest part, is just doing this kind of daily mundane maintenance and knowing what it is that you need in order to feel better, and in order to have a healthier relationship with your work. And I think without doing the kind of self reflection to ask yourself what it is that you really want, ultimately how you want to feel about your work. And there's an exercise in the book that I write about asking yourself what you want in 5 years time, and just asking myself that question at some seminar that I was at kind of changed the trajectory of my life. So I think, as you were saying, that post-it note on your monitor, this idea that we're not two different people in front of the keyboard and away from the keyboard. We're the same person all of the time. We are the common denominator throughout our entire lives, and in all of our situations, no matter where we are. And kind of realizing that, and realizing that it is just a game, or I'm just doing this for money, and that can be okay, and our whole identity does not have to be wrapped up in a job title. Kind of realizing all that and thinking more closely about our relationship with our career and our identities and everything, I think is really the key to, how to work without losing your mind.
I'd be really interested to know your view on Simon Sinek, because I'll tell you my view, which is I think he's kind of been appropriated by marketing as the universal antidote,
I don't
universal
know who he
solution
is.
to everything. And I know people, who kind of say, oh, either about their business or about themselves. I've not got a purpose. I've not got a deep inner meaning, and I've been looking for it, and until I can
Is
find
he the
my,
find your why guy?
yeah, that's the guy, yeah.
Right.
And and then you look at people who are really happy, and they and they go, yeah, Friday night I finish work, go straight down the pub, I have a pint, so to speak, when you're allowed to, fish and chips on the way home, Saturday watch the football, Sunday family around for Sunday lunch, and it's all tickety boo, and it's all fine. And if you ask these people who have these really cheerful lives, and they enjoy the company of people, and they enjoy what's going on,
Yes.
they don't have a why and a purpose.
Purpose.
They're kind of they're too busy living. It's like the John Lennon thing, is you know, life is what happens when you're too busy planning. And I do wonder about that self-reflection about, is it do we have to understand our why?
Yeah, I think when I say what it is that you really want, and the kind of self-reflection, it isn't then to, you don't do that with the view of, well, then I'm going to find my true purpose, and then I'm going to change everything so that I can have a job that is perfectly aligned with my true purpose. It's more about, how do I want to feel about my work why am I like, what actually makes me happy? Like, what do I actually want to be doing in 5 years? Like, what is the kind of like, where would I really like my life to be and to feel like in 5 years' time? And what do I need to do now to kind of ultimately get there? I don't think that everyone has to have a job or where it's aligned with their purpose or their why. I think your why could be, uh, I like to play music and have enough money to look after my family, and that's really all that matters to me, and that's fine. There are so many people, and that's part of the reason that I wanted to write this book as well, is I didn't want to just write a book that was for CEOs and people who wanted to have their own startup and run their own business and those sorts of people. I also wanted to write a book that could just help your average person who just wants to go to work to make enough money so that they can, as you say, go to the pub on Friday, get fish and chips on the way home, see their friends at the weekend, and then go to a job on Monday that doesn't make them miserable and that can just kind of go get what they need from it, make some money, and just be happy. Like, that's perfectly fine as well. We don't all have to be like hustling and starting this business. And, we don't always, not all of us need to do that. Some people want to do that, and that's great, but we don't all need to be doing that. And that doesn't mean that those folks are less than the people who are hustling.
But Facebook and Instagram and TikTok tells me that unless I'm doing all that stuff, unless I'm drinking out of flutes and we're by a swimming pool, or eating ice creams, or my kids are dressed in whatever clothes it is,
Yeah.
then I'm not a whole person. We have this comparison culture,
Yes.
that which we're all addicted. Not all of us. Many of us are addicted
Yeah.
to.
Pretty much all of us.
Pretty much all of us. Yeah, I'm just trying to say not everyone, which we're pretty much addicted to a
Yes.
lesser or greater extent, whether we just watch television or whether we've got our phones kind of screwed into
Yes.
our eyes 24/7. I mean, surely that's part of the problem.
Yeah, it is. It's this very, I mean, when I wrote this chapter on comparison culture at work and dealing with envy between colleagues and other people that, are colleagues on the internet. Um, all of that boils down to, if you're feeling triggered by somebody in their life on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. I mean, one, yes, sometimes people are just annoying, so we do have to we do have to address that. But also a lot of times it's, oh God, like, maybe part of the reason that I'm feeling so annoyed by this is because they're doing something, or I feel like they are showing me something that I would quite like for myself, and maybe I haven't admitted that to myself yet. Sometimes it's very much bringing up things that we wish that we had for ourselves, that we don't have, or maybe that we're too afraid to kind of go after. And sometimes it's, things that, if somebody has a family, or they're posting pictures with their family, particularly now when a lot of us can't be with our families, it brings up our own loneliness, or whatever it might be. Um, but yeah, with working, this whole comparison culture, it's quite toxic, and it really, I think, particularly in during this whole pandemic, what I'm hoping has happened, and I feel like I've definitely felt a big shift, in myself, is, I think, when we've been locked down and in our own houses, and we have like this phone and a window to other people's lives, I think that disconnect between our actual life and our digital life has, perhaps, that kind of divide, that delta has got even wider in a good way. I think I certainly, my relationship with social media has definitely changed, over the last year, particularly in the last 6 months. Um, I think that it's, like, as we were saying, we don't all need to be hustling and, achieving great things and being on this list or that list. And I think maybe, taking some time in this last year to kind of think about what it is that is actually important to us. Like, do we really care that this person is off doing whatever? I mean, I have to question who is able to go off and do whatever at this point in time safely. But what do we actually want? in our daily lives. And I think that the kind of show of social media, I think, has just started to feel particularly ridiculous to me throughout this pandemic.
Well,
Um,
I support you 100%. I turned everything off my phone, apart from WhatsApp, which is only for family,
mhm,
about 6 or 9 months ago. So therefore, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
yeah,
When I leave the desk, I leave it behind me, and then until the next morning. And it was it was really interesting. So apart from I'll do it next week, which went on for about 3 months, when I actually did it, I didn't realise that one, I gained an extra hour a day because I didn't have my head screwed in
yeah,
while pretending to listen to my wife talking or whatever, or listen to friends. I
yeah,
actually didn't have a phone. But more importantly, my head went up, and I was
yes,
engaging with real people rather than plastic stuff. So,
yeah,
you know, it's been a really good experience. And then once you're distanced from it,
mm,
you can see it a bit more for what it is, which is
yes,
people
it's a bit
people
ridiculous.
endlessly saying buy from me, which is more, or be as happy as I am, or whatever they say.
Yes,
The messaging isn't good. So
yes.
so so what is your advice about people's relationship with the comparison culture? That they do you think people should just live with it, or
Yeah.
should they go on, total diet, or what?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's like with a difficult manager, it's kind of going, okay, well, why are they bothering me? What is it about their behavior that's actually that I'm finding difficult, and what feelings is it bringing up for me? And I think it's the same with comparison culture. If you're on Instagram and you know this person that you know is like, oh, I have this amazing work thing happen, and now I've guess what? I have this six-figure book deal, and this amazing thing also happened to me. It can really start to grate, but I think it's you have to ask yourself, well, why is this? What do I care? Like, good for them. They're doing amazing things. They're succeeding. Why do I actually have a problem with it? Do I think that, I deserve to have something like that happen to me? Okay, well, why would I deserve that? Am I putting in the work? They've been doing, their
Yeah.
podcast or whatever for years and years. Do I even have one? Is it, you have to kind of go, this is someone's highlights reel. This is kind of the curated best of. You're not seeing all of the hard work, all of the kind of blood, sweat, and tears that have no doubt gone into them receiving that accolade. So there's that kind of perspective change that has to happen. That we know that we're seeing curated bits of other people's lives, but you have to also remember we're seeing the best curated bits of other people's lives. Um, and thinking, okay, again, why is this hard for me? What feelings is this bringing up? Is it because I wish that I had this thing? Okay, well, maybe I want to have, this award or whatever, this goal. What am I doing towards that? Am I doing anything towards that? No, I'm not. Okay, well, maybe I should be doing that rather than just sitting here on my phone getting pissed off because someone else is doing it. Yeah, so I think again, a lot of it boring. A lot of it comes back to that self-reflection and getting the perspective of, okay, well, what I feel this way, why do I feel this way, and what can I actually do about it.
Yeah, yeah. So if we just go back to the job bit for a minute,
Yes.
um, a question with two sides to it. So the one is, how do you know whether to quit your job, or when to quit your job, or that's one question I'd like to
Yeah.
pose. And also I'd like
Sure.
you to think about the other side of that coin, which is, how do you know what you want from your career? So it's like a two-part question.
Yeah. Yeah. First, okay. First part, when to quit your job. That's a tricky one because I think a lot of our initial feeling when you're having a bad day or you've had an argument with your manager or whatever is, okay, bye. I'm going to quit. I'm done. And I think perhaps a lot of us when we were younger maybe did just that. And we're like, all right, see you later. But unfortunately, not all of us have the luxury of just walking away from a client, from a job, from a project, for something that we have committed to. So when to quit? I think obviously if you are, it's a spectrum. If you are experiencing, harassment, discrimination at work, being bullied, that on one end of the extreme, get out. Get out. I don't think you have. We all know when things are serious, and when it's that bad. Just get yourself out of that situation. Keep yourself and your well-being safe. Most of us don't end up here. We're probably somewhere in the middle where it's just kind of like I'm bored, or I am in a tricky situation relationally with my colleagues or my manager, whatever. So I think really it comes down to basically it's like one of those quizzes in a magazine back in the day where it's like, okay, what's going on here, yes or no, and then you go over here and then, okay, has this thing happened, yes or no. So a lot of that is, have I done the work basically to figure out what is bothering me and why I feel like I need to quit. Okay, is it this situation with my manager? Okay, well, what's going on with that situation? Have I had a conversation with my manager about it? No? Okay, well, then I should probably do that. And okay, yes, I have had this conversation. Has anything changed? Have I brought solutions to the table? Do I feel honestly within myself that I have put in as much effort as I could to try to make the situation work? And then if the answer is still yes, and you feel like you've asked for what you need to be good at your job, if you need things to change, if you need a new manager, whatever, and the answer is still no, well then maybe yes, you do need to get a new job. But also equally, you don't have to go through all of those things. If you just really, really hate it and you've gone, this just isn't for me, this is making me really upset, and you have the freedom and the financial sort of wherewithal to get out as soon as you don't want to be somewhere, that's also fine. I think realistically, a lot of us are in situations where we probably care a lot about our career. We don't want to have to change jobs. And, maybe you don't want to change companies, but you just want to change teams, and it can get really complicated. But I think ultimately it is kind of going through that decision tree, a flow chart of, is there something, a big reason why I feel like I need to leave? Have I asked for that thing actually? Is there any way that I could alleviate this part of my job that's making it so difficult? Because a lot of times it does feel like, well, if I could just have, Fridays off, or if I could actually leave at this time every day, it would make it so much easier because my commute is killing me, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the main thing for me is, have you asked for what it is that you need to make this job
Yeah,
better?
yeah, yeah. And the part two was how do we figure out what we
What
want
we
from our
actually want.
career?
I mean, if I had the answer to that, I feel like I would be really, I would have a lot of money.
Well,
um,
it's the how do you figure it out as opposed to
how do you
the
figure it
how do
out?
you
Yeah.
figure it
I
out.
mean, for me, what happened for me is that and I write about this in the book, is I was at this seminar, I think is the name for it, workshop, where it was talking about mindfulness at work. And there was a lot of meditation, and I spent the first day just being really irritated at the whole thing. And then on the second day, and I wasn't quite so irritated, they basically told us the story of a woman called Roz Savage, who had a very high flying career, and she was asked to do this thing called the obituary exercise, where she basically had to write her obituary if she were to die that day, and then ask herself the question, do I actually like what this says? And she did not. And then, of course, she did the very extreme thing of, quitting your corporate job and then, rowed across 3 oceans or something like that. But so then we were asked, you don't have to write your obituary, but what would you like your life to look like in 5 years' time? And they had us journal for 3 minutes straight, just, unfiltered, stream of consciousness, just continue writing, don't stop to read or overthink it. And I did this. And the things that I wrote down, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'd never really considered that. And then after reading back what we had written, some jerk in the back of the room was like, excuse me, but I just realized that if I'm going to start on this 5-year plan, like, I need to be doing it like right now. Like, and that scared, I was like, what? Like, I had this page of information of things that I apparently wanted that I had never considered really consciously. And then the idea that I should be focusing on that right then and there. So I think you can do an exercise like that to bring forward some of the things that you want for yourself. But then there's a lot of thinking and a lot of talking that has to kind of go around that. Maybe that's between yourself and your partner. If you think a relocation is in order, if you want to have kids, if you want to quit your job and go back to school and retrain, whatever it is. I think allowing yourself to kind of just think a bit bigger and a bit broader and or smaller, in fact, for what, would make your heart sing. What would, like, the idea of what would make you get out of bed and be happy that you get to go and do this thing. And it doesn't always have to be work related. I think just asking yourself what you want your life as a whole to feel like and what you want your job, your career to feel like. And if that's the main thing for you, because it might not be. You might want to completely de-emphasize your career and your job title and focus on other things. And that might be, buying an allotment and
Yeah,
gardening. And
I
that's
love it.
totally fine.
I absolutely love it. I love it. I love it. We're pretty much out of time. Well, we are out of time. So, just finally, uh, what projects have you got lined up? What are the kind of things on your, not on your to-do list, but on the on the flip chart, wherever it is? We've got any interesting projects lined up you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a very interesting situation where I had a baby for the first time about a month ago, and
Project.
I'm
That's
self-employed,
project.
and I just had a book and a podcast come out. So,
Three
so
babies.
yeah, basically, I had 3 babies this year, and it's only April. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm trying to figure out my next book, and I'm having to kind of take my own advice from this book and go, okay, what do I kind of want in this post first book, first podcast, first baby, but still wanting to be self-employed? What does that look like for me? So for right now, I am kind of exploring doing more talks and a few master classes, and trying to really see if I can focus more on writing in this kind of next phase of my career. So I don't have anything necessarily to plug just yet, but
No, that's fine. That sounds
yeah.
great. And finally, I mean, what are your? You can answer this how you wish. It's what are the things you hear yourself saying quite often to people, or what are your pearls of wisdom, or what are some of the kind of the one-liners you'd like to leave us with?
Have you actually asked for what you need? I think is the biggest one.
Perfect.
Because so
Well,
often the answer is no.
yeah. Have you actually asked what you need? That's absolutely spot on. That's a perfect place to finish. Kate, thank you so much. It's been absolutely fantastic to get a bit of insight into the book and why you've written it and how you've written it, and your attitude and your approach. It's been it's been a real pleasure to spend some time and talk with you.
Thank
So
you.
thank you very much indeed.
And thank you, and I've really enjoyed this.